Thanks for attending this talk on functional marketing. I'm Heidi Anderson, and I've been working on this material for several years, and I'm super excited to share it with you. It's specifically for local regenerative producers who sell at farmers markets, farm stands, and to local intermediaries. And it's basically how you can confidently meet your sales goals with do-it-yourself marketing that conserves time and effort and keeps you aligned with local values. So a little bit about me. When I was in college, I ended up working on an organic local farm that was a summer camp and an educational facility. And it was it was called Hidden Villa, and it was in California, and their mission was social and environmental justice. And it was pretty life transforming. I loved it there. I ended up working there for multiple seasons and absorbed the values of what they were doing, and have incorporated them in my life since then. And around the same time, I ended out getting exposed somehow to heavy metals and organophosphates, pesticides. It took me a couple of decades to find out what it was, but it made me very sick for decades. So I have this personal passion about healthy food and the health of our planet that's very personal because of that. For the last few decades, I've been working in the software development arena, and I've had the 10,000 plus hours of practicing analysis. And about 10 years ago, I started getting super interested in applying my software experiences to environmental and social impact. And after working on several things, I ended up focusing in on this area of local economies and how to use software within the free market to help local economies thrive and grow, which really means helping local regenerative farmers thrive and grow. So I have a tool, startup with a tool called TheFarmBoard, and I'll mention it a little bit further down. So this material is dedicated to local regenerative producers. I think of you all as being the healers of our time, of the planet, our health, communities, food sovereignty, and food security. I think it's one of the only things that we do, collectively and globally, where people know that we can reverse the climate damage with regenerative farming. So what is marketing? It's the activities you plan and do to meet your sales goals. And typically in the local business, in local regenerative economies, it's the sales goals would be to attract sales from existing customers, attract more customers, maybe add a new sales channel, build sales resilience, or build your reputation. And these are the areas. The problem I took on is, how do you help producers market without messing up the local economy in any way? Today, I think that most producers use an ad hoc kind of hodgepodge method of marketing that's highly entrepreneurial, because the business is highly entrepreneurial. A lot of producers aren't, people who love to farm don't typically love to market, so there can be this resistance to it. And of course, there's always a shortage of time, and both from a work perspective and from a perishables perspective. And then there's lots of tools to choose from and lots of activities to choose from. So it can cause quite a lot of stress, and overwhelm on producers. And so if any of that describes you, then functional marketing was created as the antidote to all of that. It helps you achieve your sales goals without having stress and overwhelm by kind of limiting down what you do and making it highly effective. So functional marketing has three parts. There's a learning, which is what we'll do today, and it'll take about 20 minutes. And then there's a planning, which you would do, maybe once a year. It could even be less often, depending upon how much you're having change. Every time you have a big change, you would want to revisit the planning. And then there's action. And like I mentioned, the goal is to make the action minimalist, but really effective. So the next part of this talk, we'll learn about market size, competition, customers, product and pricing, and promotion, and how those things work together. And you can draw conclusions off of them about what would make sense to do with your marketing action. So starting with market size, there have been polls where people in the US were asked how highly they value local food. And over half the population responds consistently that they highly value local food. There's every year there's $1,900 billion spent on food in the US. And so if you take half of that, it's $800+ billion per year. The people that are spending roughly that are saying they highly value local food. Yet less than 1% of the 900 billion is supplied locally. So what does that mean for competition? Competition in the food industry is about alternatives. If you think about a person has a number of food dollars that they're going to spend, and they're choosing whether to spend it with you or whether to spend it with another provider. And the other provider could be within the local system, or they could be conventional. As we just illustrated, most that there's this massive unmet demand that's actually being spent in conventional alternatives. And if you compare that to what's being spent, by local alternatives, about 10 billion across the US per year, very roughly, and conventional alternatives are about 800 billion, as I mentioned. So it makes sense to attract sales from that are being spent on conventional alternatives as opposed to competing with local alternatives. And I'll go into it more later, but it makes sense to collaborate with your local alternative producers, even if they're selling the same thing, just because this unmet demand is so huge. Okay, so that now we can talk about customers. So what do these 50% seek? And we all know that they're seeking a stew, I call it a stew of values because there's a lot of them. But they can be divided out into categories. So there's core goods values, and examples of these are, flavor, freshness, nutrition, maybe diversity, unusual goods. And then there's social values. So there's things like, community participation. There can be food sovereignty, food security. I think is a really strong value for local systems, as the environmental values, and the sustainability and repair of our earth. So one of these sets of values is about the individual. It's personal. It's about them and their family, which is the core goods values. And that's the reason why a person shops. They need to buy food to eat, so they're looking to meet those values. And then the social and environmental values are progressively more and more altruistic. So social values are altruistic on a community level, and environmental values are altruistic globally. And the main point of categorizing them like this is that it's super important to meet the core goods values, like the personal values of the buyer, and then to pile on the other two. So I've separated these out into stock values and then what I'm calling differentiation values. So stock values are, and you can see I put examples for each of those three categories in here. So we talked about goods values being flavor, nutrition, safety, no added toxins, those kinds of things. All of these, actually, all of the values that I've looked at can be really easily appropriated by conventional systems. Um, and but the stock values can be appropriated in a way that customers can't prepare. Can't compare. So, for example, if a customer, goes to a conventional outlet and is buying, heirloom organic tomatoes from Mexico, and they know that you'll have heirloom organic tomatoes, from in town. There's no way to know where they're going to get the better flavor with these kinds of values. There's some like gray fuzziness in there. And these values also include elemental and composite values. So like organic, regenerative, local as value containers, they're composites. Um, those those values are also really easily appropriated, as we all know, and really easy to compare between a local and a conventional alternative. Um, so these stock values are super important. They describe the product. They're important to cover, if you are whichever ones you're serving. It's important. I think of them as being good things to list, kind of like a product ingredient. You're selling heirloom tomatoes, and these are the ingredients in the tomato. Um, but they don't differentiate the product from conventional alternatives. So in isolation, they don't attract more sales. So these are the products that do differentiate between conventional and local. We all know that conventional systems' big strength when it comes to comparing with locals, convenience, and then the local strengths that are really that I think are the most important are trust and freshness. So when we think about, we all know why it's a local producer who is trustworthy, is way more trustworthy to the local people who trust them than anything that any conventional alternative. And it really, trust is a magnifier value. Once there's trust in place, then all of those stock values that we were looking become magnified. If some package in a conventional alternative says it's fresh on it, that does not mean as much as if a trusted local producer tells you they harvested the tomatoes today or yesterday. So trust is huge, and then second to that is freshness. Um, uh, if the customers know when the product was harvested, or if it's produced, when ingredients were harvested with respect to when it was made, that kind of information, then a local producer can always out fresh a conventional alternative. And then conversely, convenience is the strength of conventional. And I think that historically, a lot of people local systems just aren't as convenient, and they never will be as convenient. Many aspects of convenience, and there's actually some areas in terms of product availability and variety that actually can a huge amount of convenience can be added to local that kind of makes this convenience strength not as important. So we'll talk about that. So now product and pricing. So what does all that mean for product and pricing? Well, humans naturally categorize goods into either commodities or premium products. And a commodity is it's goods plus low cost plus convenience. And local producers can never compete with a commodity. Uh, and its conventional system is efficient. It knows that's its big, you know, success factor. It knows how to efficiently, create commodities and deliver them to us for the lowest cost. An entrepreneurial, local producer can't compete with that. So the product is premium, and it's premium because of the goods plus the values with which it's delivered. And like we were just discussing, trust and freshness come at the top, and then the whole stew of stock values is supported by that trust. And some of them are supported by freshness too, like nutrition and flavor. If you know your product was harvested yesterday or this week, then it's really easy to assume the nutrition and the flavor are going to be better than anything you could get anywhere else. So, with this premium product comes premium pricing. And I think the main thing about premium pricing is that you want to keep your pricing within the realm of like premium products. So it would be locally grown with the value set that you offer. That's where you want your pricing to be. And you can support food equity without impacting your premium pricing, because all these brilliant people got these things implemented that are supported that enable that. So when you accept WIC or double up food bucks, then you're basically keeping your pricing premium, and so it doesn't confuse the market about that this is premium product, it is not a commodity, and yet the customers can get huge discounts for buying it. So just to do a quick recap, we went through the first 4 areas to learn, and for market size, what we identified is there's huge unmet demand for local food that's currently being met by conventional systems. And then there's and then in terms of competition, the competition is about being an alternative to conventional for that market size with the huge unmet demand. The customers are looking for the value stew, and a little bit more convenience, and then the product and pricing is premium. So now we'll go into promotion, and there's some learning on promotion around how to reduce inconvenience or increase convenience easily, and how to entice with trust and freshness is sort of like the 3 focuses on minimal marketing. So starting with promotion, like I said, we're going to increase convenience, entice with trust and freshness, and there's 4 ways to do that. So the first one is to increase convenience with better communication and content. So today, typically, no one knows what's available or the price of what's available locally. And I think that so it's a mystery market. And it relies on the people that are buying a lot in it are people who love the mystery and who love working around what's available. And there's a high ethic for being able to just work around what's available and in season. However, the fact that it's a mystery market provides this really incredible opportunity to share trustworthy, real-time, up-to-date product availability and pricing, as well as where and when to buy, um, to repeat customers so that they always. So instead of, um, customers having to, um, find out, like, do some digging to find out what they can get, it's making it really easy for them to see what they can get and how much it'll cost. And the sales can be captured for people that feel like they don't have the time to take the risk, on the mystery. So, um, with respect to pricing, the reason why it makes sense for pricing to be transparent is, um, is that people have fear when people don't know the pricing, they're much less, um, willing to go take the risk to go show up. If they know the pricing, even though it's high, like, even if it's the highest of, like, local, products, they're likely to still go and get it because it's premium product that you're offering. It's just that the mystery of the pricing really does stop people from coming to buy. And the second idea is to increase convenience by adding in more collaboration. So, uh, collaboration solves the problem of, limited variety and quantity. And so when you think about shopping at the grocery store, you usually know what you can expect there, roughly what the prices will be, and that you can get the quantity that you want. Most likely, it's very rare that you wouldn't, be able to find what you like to buy there. And so, collaboration in the forms of farmers markets, Rico rings, or collaborative farm stands, um, addresses both of those problems. It's increasing quantity and it's increasing variety, and so it's a way of attracting, more customers and actually more sales to your venues. The third out of four, uh, ways to meet your sales goals is to assure your community and customers trust you. So, this is all about, considering, do you have, 100% trust in your community? And if you don't, the biggest way to increase disclosure. So this would be ideas like storytelling about what regenerative, um, production techniques you use on your farm, how you're taking care of the soil, that kind of thing. And then you want to watch over integrity, always doing what you say you are doing, because if you have a breach in trust, it's very difficult to, um, repair. You want to keep your information up to date. That's a trust issue. So if your contact information, your availability, your pricing isn't up to date, it gives people that adds into trust. And, you want to keep your product in a cooler to keep it fresh. So you're offering community members, the freshest food around. But if during distribution it sits in the sun or, isn't taken care of so that it wilts by the next day, then that's not meeting the customer's needs. So, um, the next the next I think we have, yeah, so then the last one, which is really number 4, is, to its freshness. So, for this one, the idea is an extension of what I just said, to assure your product is delivered in a way that maintains freshness, and then also to communicate why it's fresh. So, and communicate about the freshness separate from the other stock values. So I think of like freshness, and trust, messaging to be kind of above the stock values. So here's an example of a difference. So a conventional, product might say, it's grown locally in California and delivered fresh to you. Maybe it expires in 224. And then a local example in contrast to that would be something like harvested in Salida on 9/28, transported 10 miles from our farm to the Main Street Farmers Market. So it's like explicit about what's going on and is extremely attractive to people who are seeking local food. So so that's the learning. And then the next step in functional marketing is the planning. And the final one is to do ongoing minimalist action, which we don't cover here. So the minimalist planning has two pieces to it. First is to identify your sales channels that you're selling through. Identify your sales goals, your differentiation values, and stock values. And then decide if you want to make any pricing adjustments for premium pricing. And that all takes, maybe 10 minutes to do that for your specific farm. And then the next step is to plan your promotion to meet your goals for each sales channel. So the promotion has, a content element and then a how and where to promote. So starting with the content element, what we define minimalist promotion as being a link to product availability and pricing, including when, where people can buy, and list of stock values, visually separated from freshness and information. And then optionally, you can also add in explicit freshness info, the ability to prepay for product and pickup, or disclosures about your farm and how you produce. So that is the minimal content to attract more of the people that are buying conventionally instead of local. And then the way in which you promote in a minimalist way is to have an email list and a real-time availability and pricing list. So why an email list instead of anything else? It's the only way to keep a collection of your customers that went by repeatedly without them having to sign up and belong to some tool, which no one wants to do. I shouldn't say no one. Most people don't want any more tools. And so customers can opt in, they can unsubscribe if they leave the area, they have control over it, and you have full visibility into what your repeat customer list is and can communicate really easily at any time. The reason why email is the only item on here is that I think you can run a really successful business producing as much as you want with just these two things and nothing else. And so this minimalist promotion plan is it's basically a recommendation of what to focus on at minimum, and then anything else that you add is extra. So the email list and the real-time availability and pricing are, help you attract sales from existing customers, and they also help you create sales resilience. And the way that you create sales resilience, so sales resilience is the pandemic happened last year, and a whole bunch of farmers were selling to restaurants. Some of the restaurants suddenly disappeared, and the farmer has all this harvest. Well, if you design your email list in a way so that you know that if you lose large customers, that you can still sell what you have, and you have your real-time availability and pricing already in place, then you can just it's just a pivot to new customers. Example, like if people last year had, like, let's say there was a farmer that had two restaurants, so they feel like they're safe. Why restaurants both go out of business at the same time, and no consumer customers. So they could choose one of several ways to go about creating resilience. One would be to partner with a producer who only sells to consumers, and add that producer to the email list, and have an agreement that if something disastrous happens, that producer will immediately help you yourself your product to their consumer list, basically. That would be one way. Another way would be to do the same thing of partnering with other businesses. So it could be expanding the number of businesses who are interested, or it could be also, um, doing some consumer sales, so that you have a consumer list in there, and then the consumers can help you sell everything in the case of a disaster. So these two things, provide insurance against a sales loss disaster. Then if your goal is to attract customers or build your reputation, the single best thing to do for that is to collaborate more. So we already mentioned collaboration as a way to increase convenience with variety and quantity, and now we're saying it's also incredible for attracting new customers and building reputation, which is it's pretty obvious. You participate in a respected farmers market with other respected producers, and the customers that go there then try out your product, and you're basically building your reputation by being associated with the farmers market. So there's actually non-minimalist marketing practices that I wanted to mention that aren't included in the plan above. And one of the obvious ones is social media. So social media compared to email, social media only reaches a subset of repeat buyers, and probably kind of a small subset. Um, and people would have to see your posts or seek them out to go there to find out, what's happening. Um, and it can help attract new community members, but I believe collaboration is a faster, much better way in local systems to do that. So I think of social media. I know there's been lots of concern and advice to post a lot to social media, but I actually think of it as kind of an edge case for a communication tool, and that it should only be used if you really enjoy using it, since it doesn't get to all your customers. And then there's several sales and delivery um, concepts that are in use that also they have trade-offs to the values that local buyers have. So an example is e-commerce online sales, which is great for things like I buy organic pecans from a farmer friend in New Mexico, um, using her online platform, and it works perfectly for that. It's not perishable. It's a single item that's amazing. But if people are if a producer is selling any perishables, um, then uh, then there's trade-offs of freshness, community and sustainability values. So it's really only useful for a subset of the potential customers. It can be helpful for intermediary sales to increase convenience for intermediaries, um, but not if they have to adopt new tech to buy, for the most part, because that creates an inconvenience for them and a learning curve. So I I also wanted to mention up with this, the idea of buying online and then having to pick up what you bought. It doesn't really help the customer to do that. It adds a layer of something they have to go do on their computer before they pick. But there's also a subset of people who would like to buy ahead so that they know the product will be there for them, and that is actually a convenience. So you can see um, it's a subset of customers that would even be interested. Delivery adds convenience too, but it can trade off freshness, trust, to adding a layer, like a middle layer of people in there. You don't choose your own premium products. You're buying premium products, but you're not choosing them. And but it's also usually required for intermediary sales, so it makes sense for a lot of local businesses, just not all. And then classic CSAs are actually another example, um, where they help farmers with funding and harvest planning. But the trade-off is customer food waste, people's food preferences sometimes, and the pickup inconveniences. So, many customers would buy more if they could plan and choose their own products and quantities. So I realize classic CSAs work for a lot of us and are helpful. And it's actually a lot easier for customers if they can just come, if they know what you have and can come by as much as they want. So that's it on the overview of functional marketing. And I hope that you come join us at the live breakout. We're going to create a marketing plan for the coming year. Each of you will be able to create a marketing plan. And you'll do those steps that we just talked about, where you'll identify the et cetera, and then plan your promotion. And I have a template that you to do it, that you can edit over time and use and augment. So please come join us. Thank you for attending.